Morning everyone, thanks very much for having us here this morning. As you quite rightly said, I was part of the GB rowing team once upon a time. Feels like an awfully long time ago now. I was a coach rowing professionally for 15 years. And in the last 10 years, there's sort of been a transition from coaching purely rowing to transitioning to performance coaching, taking what I'd learned about people and performance in that arena into other realms. As it happens at school, I was the stereotypical scrawny kid who was rubbish at sport. I was the kid who never got picked for any teams. I've still got a picture of me at 12 years old coming last in my school's 1500 metres. I still remember a conversation with my coach at the time when I was 16. I said, I want to be in the school's first team one day. You know what he did? He laughed in my face. I know, tiny violins. 18 months later, I came second at national team trials and went to several world championships. And I decided a long time ago I was never going to let anyone tell me what I could or couldn't achieve. I was never going to let myself or someone else put limits on what I could do. And that's something I've become really passionate about passing on to other people. So it's amazing. I don't know if any of you watched Eliud Kipchoge at the weekend. And I love the hashtag that went with that. No human is limited. So that's a lot of what I'm about. There's a reality. I didn't have amazing physiology. I wasn't an actual athlete, so I had to develop a psychological edge to perform at a high level. And yes, that means, you know, mental toughness, being able to push through pain, all that stuff, but it doesn't just mean that. It means all sorts of other things about working intelligently. It means knowing yourself and how to get the best out of yourself. It means knowing how to get the best out of others. It means developing persistence and self-belief and resilience and all the sort of other stuff that goes with it. And this ties into what we've found from working with Gareth Bale, who some of you might know has been involved with ROWBOTS right from the start, in terms of developing our physiology. That he also feels very strongly that yes, fitness starts with the body, but it's enhanced through working on the mind. I want to put up a few statistics, and I wonder if anyone can tell me what these represent. So these are statistics around mental health. So 1 in 4, what do you think that figure represents? Sorry?
Suffers with depression?
Yeah, pretty close. So that's the number of adults that will experience some form of mental health problem every year. What about 1 in 8? Anyone has a guess what that represents? That's the number of adults with a mental health problem currently receiving treatment. So of the 1 in 4 of us in this room are going to have some form of mental health problem in the next year. Only 1 in 8 of us will receive treatment, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and I know Zoe's going to allude to some of the others, but one of the issues is accessibility. Outside of my work with ROWBOTS, I do a lot of work with teams in the NHS, and resources are stretched, there's huge waiting times, there's accessibility issues. Quite simply, the capacity to deal with it, the demand, is massively outstripped by the demand itself. And this means we have to take a more preventative and proactive approach to mental health. Why do we wait until there's a problem before we do anything about it? You hear this phrase, someone has mental health, we all have mental health. Why do we wait until there's a problem before we do anything about it? But not only why do we wait until there's a problem, but we only talk about mental health in a deficit-based way. You know, I love this quote from Sean Acker, who's a psychologist at Harvard University: the absence of disease is not health. With physical health, we talk about how do we achieve excellence, how do we achieve outstanding. You talk about someone who's in amazing physical shape, but we don't talk about that. We don't talk in that way about mental health. Why don't we talk about that way about mental health? And to talk a little bit more about that and about the relationship between exercise and developing great mental health, I'll hand over to Zoe.
Thanks, Ben. So my name's Zoe Aston. I'm a psychotherapist of coming up to about 9 years and a mental health consultant in the fitness industry. The other thing I do is I developed and created something I call Your Mental Health Workout, and off the back of that I'm known as the psychology programmer at ROWBOTS. So my mission statement is to make working on your mental health as accessible and acceptable as working on your physical health. And my entry into the field of psychology and mental health is actually born out of my own mental health experiences, and having pulled myself through some of the real dark places and self-loathing that lots of mental health conditions can get you into. It's a real privilege to do things like this and pay it forward, because personally and professionally I have seen the maximum benefits of exercise on mental health, but I've also become really fascinated with the possibility for psychological change during exercise, not just as a byproduct, not just something that happens afterwards, but during exercise. Now, as Ben has already mentioned, 1 in 4 of us will have a diagnosable mental health issue, but that doesn't mean that the other 3 of you are immune. We all have mental health. And I would really like to see us in a place where we don't just take it for granted that we have good mental health. Actually, it's something that we can work on consistently throughout our lifetimes. So, in addition to some of the things that Ben mentioned about why people don't necessarily ask for help with their mental health, with their mind, the stuff about stretched resources and waiting times, there's also the issue of stigma attached to mental health, and that goes back generations. The previous speaker talked a little bit about epigenetics, which is something I'm really into, but I'm not going to go into right now. But it goes back generations. Shame and self-consciousness travels through families, and that's often something that stops people asking for help with their mind. So we really want to create an environment where people feel able to come forward and talk about what goes on in their heads in the same way that we talk about what goes on in our bodies. All of you, at some point in your life, will experience anxiety, stress, some kind of low mood, some kind of negative psychological or emotional experience that you don't necessarily feel comfortable with. And we want to make sure that you have an opportunity to not just deal with it when it becomes symptomatic, but be psychologically in shape, psychologically strong enough to deal with it before it becomes a problem. So within the community, we're also trying to validate emotional processing and create a space where we can contribute to having good mental health and use exercise as a way to process emotion and process psychological experiences rather than just discharging negative emotion. So in general terms, we know exercise most of the time is good for your mental health. There are some anomalies to that, but in general terms, exercise is good for your mental health. And there's more to it than that. So when I was writing the psychology behind the ROWBOTS workout, I found that something that we call rational emotive behavioural therapy is proving to decrease negative core emotions and increase emotional and physical resilience, especially when used alongside exercise. And I also found that a particular research study used a virtual rowing task and proved that because of the amount of the body that's involved in rowing, the maximum amount of body parts that's involved in rowing, the metabolism of the mind and the arousal centres of the mind are really active, so it creates a optimal biochemical environment for psychological change. So that allows for assimilation of new information about ourselves, about our core beliefs, and basically has really, really good outcomes. So the combination of REBT, rational emotive behavioural therapy, rowing, and positive psychology, which is widely used in the fitness industry already, really gives the ROWBOTS workout something that nowhere else has. It really kind of opens up a window of opportunity for change. And the particular way that we've formatted the classes, the particular techniques that the trainers are using, works with the neuroplasticity of the mind and benefits your mental health. And I hope that this is a real deepening of our understanding of how we can encourage a generation of wellness trends and fitness lovers to actually work on their mental health the same way they work on their physical health. Over to you, Ben.
Thanks very much. So, as Zoe said, what we've tried to do is work the psychology in from the start, and I think this comes back to a conversation I had with Greg and Sam, two of the ROWBOTS co-founders, about their experiences noticing this trend around the sort of fitness industry for adding in or trying to recognise the need for improving mental health around the various offerings around London, but that it sometimes was, because it was a bolt-on, it sometimes felt like a bit of an afterthought. So this was about trying to work it in right from the start. And each of the sort of class themes have specific psychological objectives, and the physical and technical components of the class essentially work towards these objectives, whether it be about how to develop a growth mindset, whether it be about how to deal with overwhelm, developing elements of mindfulness and improving focus, whether it be about how to use or distribute your energy more effectively, how to pace yourself, whether it be how to develop self-acceptance and allow for recovery in the way that you work, but also the way you live your life, how you can take those attributes into everyday life. In terms of the demand, we've seen some really amazing feedback so far. It's clear that a lot of the comments in the feedback have been about how people have appreciated having that focus on mental conditioning, on elements of mindfulness in the class, that being something they value, and also comments about how people have valued coming into an environment where they feel valued, where they feel accepted, where they don't feel judged. You know, a number of the people who come say, I often find fitness classes an intimidating environment, and I haven't felt that. So I think that's been a really interesting, I think there's a lot of people who resist doing that sort of exercise because of some of those fears. I think ultimately, we're, you know, it's early days, we're 3 months in, we're really excited to be already looking at the next 2 sites, and it's really exciting and interesting to see others sort of following suit really, and this trend growing. I think there's no better way of finishing to say that health is health. You know, the mind is part of the body. I think in my ideal world we wouldn't talk about the mind-body connection, we would recognise the mind as part of the body, that physical and mental health are entirely entwined. The more we can talk about things in that manner, the more we can encourage people to work on their whole system, the better. And we're proud to be playing our part in that journey. Thanks very much.